Welcome to Timekeeping. This show will attempt to chronicle year-by-year changes to Disneyland Paris, from the excitement of a new ride opening to the minutiae of a store changing names. Join us as we celebrate 30 years of the resort. The spirit of adventure is often linked with exotic, tropical places. Many of us dream of traveling to those mysterious, far-off regions of the world. This is what one can do the moment you pass through the portals of Adventureland at Disneyland Paris. Outside the Arabian arches of the land, guests will find flaming torches, but also a nod to the land's earliest roots. The original entry at Disneyland was meant to be based on Walt Disney's true-life adventure films. Well, the globe and compass logo of the legendary series can be found marking the entrance to the main thoroughfare of the land here in France. Onion domes and ornate weather vanes dot the skyline as guests traverse the sandy paths towards the entry portal. When designing Adventureland for Disneyland Paris, Imagineers intended to keep the original idea of blending exotic environments from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Yet, since the 1001 Arabian Nights are part of the European vision of exotism, they decided to add a Middle Eastern pavilion at the entrance of the land. Named the Adventureland Bazaar, the small recreation of an Oriental city also acts as a shopping and eating plaza. This is a fascinating maze of winding lanes, little squares, and wonderful gardens, where Oriental merchants once beckoned you into their mysterious shops, craftsmen sat cross-legged plying their trades, and musicians played a serenade to the seductive accompaniment of a softly splashing fountain. The Epcot Center Morocco Pavilion was used as the inspiration for all of this. The area is heavily propped with authentic artifacts from around the world, including many Imagineers acquired from real Morocco. Originally, the area featured a proper Oriental soundtrack, but since the Disney film Aladdin was released in 1992, the soundtrack was soon replaced with the movie's one. However, the original soundtrack was brought back shortly after the park's 15th anniversary. The indoor shopping arcade featured a central alley and 4 distinct boutiques. Les Trésors de Sherazade was an Arabian boutique named after Sherazade, the legendary Persian queen and storyteller of 1001 Nights, a collection of Middle Eastern and South Asian stories and folk tales compiled in Arabic during the Islamic Golden Age. The mainframe story of the Arabian Nights is about Sherazade and her husband, the Persian king, who executed each of his wives after a single night of marriage. In order to postpone her own execution, Sherazade begins to tell, on the night of her marriage, the king a tale, but does not end it. The king is thus forced to postpone her execution in order to hear the conclusion. The next night, as soon as she finishes the tale, she begins, and only begins, a new one, and the king, eager to hear the conclusion, postpones her execution once again. So this goes on for 1001 nights. The bazaar features many references to tales from Arabian Nights, including murals of Aladdin and Genie popping out of the lamp, Sinbad the Sailor, Sherazade telling stories to her husband, the Ebony Horse, and Princess Piranzade. The most overt reference that crosses into the fantastical is the Egg of the Rock, a legendary bird of prey in Middle Eastern mythology. The egg sits high above the arches of the entrance to Adventureland. The interior of Les Trésors de Sherazade was inspired by the story of Sinbad the Sailor. Sinbad is the hero of the tale 120 in Volume 6 of Sir Richard Burton's 1885 translation of 1001 Nights. During his 7 voyages, Sinbad the Sailor visits magical places, meets terrifying monsters, and encounters supernatural phenomena. Sinbad's 7 voyages begin and are each framed by the opening story wherein the now wealthy Sinbad the Sailor plucks from the street and invites the lowly, hard-laboring Sinbad the Porter into his plushy appointed home and relates each of his adventures, hoping thereby to inspire his namesake Porter to advance his position in life through lessons learned in his travels. Of course, Sinbad wouldn't receive a ride at Disneyland Paris' Arabian section of Adventureland, but he would just 9 years later in the Arabian coast port of Tokyo Disney Sea in a ride called Sinbad's 7 Voyages, eventually Sinbad's Storybook Voyage, featuring the awfully cute Shandu. In the shop, Oriental rugs and fringed shawls hung from the rough adobe walls, while below were dresses of the finest Egyptian cotton, belts, bags of scented Moroccan leather, and jewelry gathered from all over the Orient. In an out-of-the-way corner, guests could have a cup of peppermint tea or taste some Greek, Oriental, or African sweets like filled dates or Turkish honey. A huge wooden camel could be found in the middle of the boutique, and above the structure, swords were stuck in the ceiling. The story goes that Sinbad conquered them all from his enemies. La Reine des Serpents, the store was named after the Serpent Queen, a mythical creature from the tales of 1001 Nights that is supposed to have the body of a snake and the head of a beautiful woman. The boutique sold jewelry cases, Indian tablecloths, and Egyptian perfume bottles. Le Shop d'Aladin, or Aladdin's Workshop, carried a vast selection of stylish clothing and accessories. It housed a king's ransom of exotic jewelry that spilled out onto the streets from its open doors. Guests needing a spot of helpful advice in the store of gems could find it from a friendly tiger that sat above, looking down from his magic carpet. In the mud and wattle hut of Le Chant de Tam-Tams, East African tribal artifacts, beautifully crafted baskets, gaily painted pottery, and strange carved wooden figures were sold. The Arabian section of the land would fade into Africa just across the path. La Giraffe Curieuse, or the Curious Giraffe, is a shop located just behind the entrance to the land. It marks the beginning of the African-themed area, which continues with a watering hole along to the larger counter-service restaurant and down to the water's edge with Le Café de la Brousse. The background story is that the shop is run by an enterprising man who offers adventurers an eclectic array of goods and services. In front of the building, guests can spot the all-terrain truck that he would use to go find various things to put in his shop and to take customers out on safari. The vehicle was purchased by Walt Disney Imagineering Prop Department and themed to the Safari Outpost feel. According to Imagineer Chris Teets, the all-terrain truck was originally intended for use as a point-of-sale location for souvenirs. The exterior of the Curious Giraffe was inspired by the Indiana Jones Adventure Outpost, previously called Guatemalan Weavers and Safari Outpost, a shop in the original Disneyland, which stands directly across from the Jungle Cruise. Both structures are a nice example of African mud architecture. In Africa, mud is and was often used in construction as the material is plentiful and cheap, and clay keeps buildings cool inside. The facade has three striking features: the tower, thatched roof, and the bas relief. The tower has small holes that would offer lookouts and ventilation. The thatched roof is supported by pillars that are set on stone bases to protect them from the moist ground. The bas-relief decorated exterior wall was inspired by the sculpted mud decoration found in the Hausa architecture of northern Nigeria. Once inside, guests immediately noticed the head of the giraffe poking through the hole in one of the walls. It seems like the number of customers drew his attention, and the animal is now eager to find out what's going on inside the shop. This touch of whimsy makes the place more fun, and it's how the name of the shop came to be the Curious Giraffe. According to Teets, the giraffe audio animatronic was cast from one of the Jungle Cruise giraffe molds. This was a taste of things to come as far as populating Adventureland with animated animals. The Jungle Cruise attraction, of course, was intended to be built nearby, but it was decided the cold winters and the language barriers would be prohibitive in the ride's operation. Funny enough, just 13 years later, Hong Kong Disneyland would open the next version of the Jungle Cruise, offering 3 different languages. The interior of the shop also features props that reflect the owner's business of selling cameras, tents, fishing gear, and attire. Most of the shop's furniture was custom made. However, some items were purchased, like benches and chairs that fitted the theme. The light fixtures were inspired by both authentic handmade pottery and manufactured lanterns as a blending of the old and new. Some parts of the ceiling are made out of exposed wooden beams or sticks. These are the structural methods of roof building constructed to hold the plaster roof above. The floor featured different patterns. This is mainly for visual interest, and it suggests the building materials were used as locally found. Next door was a restaurant known as Aux Épices Enchantées with enchanted spices. It was the main building of the African part of Adventureland and featured many African artifacts in the setting of a peaceful jungle. Its original meals were inspired by Africa, Asia, or the West Indies. Among the various food facilities to be located within Adventureland, Teets was requested to provide 2 table service restaurants. The people in charge of food services thought that the French culture would dictate guests to have a sit-down table service meal. One of these table service restaurants became the Blue Lagoon, the other, the Explorers Club. The Explorers Club was to be a gateway stopping point perched on the edge of civilization, and via the Jungle Cruise, unexplored adventures beyond. It was the last chance for safari supplies and a returning place to trade trinkets and tall tales in exchange perhaps for a hot meal and entertainment. Despite the ride not being built, the restaurant remained in the plans. The Jungle Cruise influence could be seen in the nearby shop Trader Sam's as well, named after a well-known Jungle Cruise character. The shop was later renamed the Indiana Jones Adventure Outpost. Back in 1992, the Explorers Club restaurant boasted some of the most fabulous food in the park. Here you can enjoy specialties from Africa and beyond, like chicken, shellfish, and roasted lamb. The very best authentic cuisine was quietly and attentively served among lush vines, tropical trees, chattering animatronic birds, rare exotic flowers, and special game trophies. Paintings of exotic landscapes adorned the walls, and the captivating safari restaurant had a cocktail bar as well. Cast members were dressed up like David Livingstone or Ernest Hemingway and entertained the little ones by telling stories, singing songs, or playing the ukulele. Think of it as Pleasure Island's The Adventurers Club meets the Magic Kingdom's Jungle Navigation Company Limited Skipper Canteen. The style of architecture of the Explorers Club restaurant needed to be large and colorful in order to catch the eye and draw guests towards it and the Jungle Cruise area beyond. Teats used reference photos such as the book Caribbean Style by Suzanne Slezen and built upon imaginative wood designs and bright colors typical of the style. A high tower structure was added so that it could be seen from a distance, with the club's flag emblem flying high above. The lookout with telescope resembles the original Jungle Cruise lookout building at Disneyland, developed by Imagineer Harper Goff. Inspiration for the open-air seating areas over the waterfalls came from the Adventureland Veranda restaurant at Disney World, which was fittingly replaced by the Skipper Canteen. The streams and waterfalls surrounding the Explorers Club add to its lush and remote theme. Windows with old-world handmade glass and wide doors can be opened to let in refreshing breezes. When Disney and his Imagineers originally designed the Enchanted Tiki Room for Disneyland, it was meant to be a table service restaurant with colorful macaws, toucans, flowers, and tikis performing above. The restaurant part of the concept was dropped in favor of the theatrical version of the show we know today. But in tribute, Teats placed 2 colorful macaw birds and 2 toucans perched in the giant banyan tree that had grown right up through the floor and had overgrown into the roof rafters above. These 4 birds were animated but with very subtle movements. A head tilt, a feather ruffle, or a body leaning forward every once in a while so that diners below would only catch a glimpse out of the corner of their eye. The interior of the Explorers Club carried on the style of the exterior with an array of eclectic light fixtures, textures, and props collected by its proprietor or brought back by the Explorers' travels. Here is an old photo taken by Chris Teats depicting the proprietor's office area with a desk, typewriter, reference books, phonograph, and charts. On the wall over the desk is a print of one of Harper Goff's paintings of the original Jungle Cruise, which he designed. This scene was set up just to the right of and around the corner from what is now the food service counter. It would be on the left corner wall next to the back row of banquettes in the main tree room. The murals in the main dining room were created by Walt Disney Imagineer Mr. John Horney. They depict many different ways of travel adventures all around the globe with just a seasoning of humor. Teats and his team went back and forth in the design stage whether the name of the restaurant would be the Explorers Club with an apostrophe S or without. Chris presented that the club was not owned by the explorers, but it was a place of and for explorers to meet. That's why in 1992 there was no apostrophe. However, soon after the opening, the apostrophe was added to the signage for reasons unclear. Of course, the Adventurers Club at Pleasure Island didn't have the apostrophe either. Still to this day, you can find references to the extinct club, most notably in beautiful light fixtures outside the main entrance. There were concerns with the foliage of Adventureland when the area was being put together that the types of greenery Imagineers wanted to cover the landscape wouldn't flourish in the Parisian climate. They were pleasantly surprised by how lush all of the landscaping turned out to be in the final product throughout the land's many regions. The creative team had some argument as to whether or not to include Tom Sawyer Island and its playground in the park, but they wanted something with more international appeal, so they built something new. Adventure Isle and its pirate theme tested much stronger with the Parisian audience. Adventure Isle incorporates elements from several classic Disney attractions and vistas such as the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse, Tom Sawyer Island, Captain Hook's pirate ship, and Skull Rock, with expanded and enhanced parts of each, and creates the centerpiece of Adventureland. The south side of the island is dedicated to telling the story of the Swiss Family Robinson. As their treehouse stands high above, the visual focal point of the entire land, deep below it lay a complex system of caves and tunnels to explore. The tree was elevated so that it would be an icon or weenie for the entire land that could be seen from very far away. Suspension and floating barrel bridges, elements from Tom Sawyer Island, lead to the north side of the island, where Captain Hook's pirate ship and Skull Rock watch over entrances to a honeycomb of caves and tunnels themed to the 1883 literary masterpiece Treasure Island. Here, too, are 5 different ways into and out of a more complex series of tunnels on 2 levels to find hidden pirate treasure. We pass by the skeletal remains of pirates left behind so they could not divulge its location. After all, dead men tell no tales. Another route goes past the bottomless pit and over bridges taking us between waterfalls with a brief glimpse to the outside world. Back into the caverns, we must traverse the stalagmite maze to finally reach the pirate throne and Ben Gunn's treasure scene, where another pirate skeleton has died trying to own it. The pirate throne is a large chair sculpted of rock with skulls all around, where guests can sit for photos. It's located just a little in front of the treasure scene and to its left. The bottomless pit can be reached if you take the Davy Jones Locker cave entrance and go immediately to your left. The wooden walkways are slightly slanted towards the pit to give you a little bit of vertigo. To give the illusion of a never-ending maze of different caves, the tunnels often run parallel with one another, but out of sight to the other. This maximizes the use of the space and creates the feeling of different experiences. Paths and steps take guests in different directions and create different viewpoints and scenes. The selection of props inside is minimal, but are reflective to the story. The Robinson's Root Cellar is made up of mostly food items and other perishables. The pirate props are basically skeletons and a pile of doubloons, jewels, and various other valuables. The names of the caves and tunnels are a play on words, keeping with the pirate theme. Ambush Alley was borrowed from Ambush Rock on Tom Sawyer Island, as was the bottomless pit. Some names were from Peter Pan, such as Cannonball Cove, Skull Rock, and Hook's Hideout. Character names are used from Treasure Island, like Ben Gunn's Cave, and other classic tales like Davy Jones' Locker. The exterior rockwork was given a specific directional look. On the very south side of the island, the rock formations start out relatively horizontal and begin to slant upward as they near the north pirate side. Rising up, they create the high point where the suspension bridge is anchored. The rock stratification is more pronounced on the north side. They fan out in 2 different directions away from Skull Rock and get more vertical as they move to a collision which sets them in an upright formation, creating Spyglass Hill Lookout, and the other high end of the suspension bridge. The rockwork was also given an ocean and wind-eroded look. According to the background story, the ocean erosion is what would have formed interior voids and grottos, creating the caves and tunnels. This was all a conscious effort to give geological sense to the formation of the island. It was decided in designing Euro Disney that a Pirates of the Caribbean ride would be included to open with the park. The plan was to take what existed, put it in a new order, and add new scenes and effects to tell the best possible story, fixing any and all issues from the past versions of the ride. Essentially, make it bigger and make it better. However, Imagineers once again faced a high water table, but they were determined to have 2 drops. Ground was broken in 1988, and construction of the 3-story ride in 2 show buildings began in January of 1990. It was ready, of course, for opening day, April 12, 1992. The 1,560-foot flume ride system was built by Intamin, and up to 35 boats would carry nearly 23 guests at a time. Unlike the other Disney parks, Paris doesn't feature an elegant New Orleans facade nor the curving Spanish style. Instead, it is a 3,000-meter-high fort showcasing the scars of battle from the sieges of yesterday. The inspiration for the fort was San Felipe del Morro Fort in Puerto Rico's San Juan. It was constructed in the 16th century to defend the city from pirates such as Roberto Cofresi. It also drew inspiration from San Jose de Campeche Fort in a trading village off the Gulf of Mexico. If you arrive from Adventure Isle, Caribbean Plaza is the next logical step in a journey passing the Pirate Galleon and Skull Rock. The entrance is on the other side of the Swordsman's Sea, around the nautical side of Chateau de la Marionette that looks like Geppetto's shipwreck. The covered passageway that separates Fantasyland and Adventureland is designed with natural materials that include elements of both 19th century England and a Caribbean landscape. A winding exterior queue leads guests into and then through the massive fort and into an eternal nighttime harbor, complete with the Blue Lagoon restaurant. Outside, landscaping teams sought to imitate the rich vegetation of the Caribbean as much as possible, with an array of plants that would thrive in the local climate, including Chinese windmill palm and fern trees. To have flowers all year long, gardeners chose species with different blooming seasons. Charity flowers from January to March, rhododendrons from April to May, albizias in the summer, and Sansevieria camellia from October to December. The interior queue of the fort takes guests through crew cabins, dungeons, ammunition depots, and lookouts. The arsenal's cannon is an authentic artifact from the 18th century. The walls are dotted with rings designed to move ropes to make barrels of gunpowder fall, and holes and arrow slits are everywhere so that invading enemies can be thwarted. Most ominous of all is a room with an Iron Maiden. Guests come out the other side of the Citadel and find themselves beneath a starry sky on a peaceful evening. The ride begins with guests sailing through a long-abandoned pirate galleon, filled with creatures now overrunning it. The ship is so large, in fact, that the bow hangs over the queue, while the stern sits inside the restaurant. The Blue Lagoon restaurant is run by the descendants of the original Spanish fort residents, as well as the descendants of people of the village who we see throughout the ride. The entry area is lined with concept art for the original version of the attraction, mostly from the legendary Imagineer Mark Davis. You'll even find a pirate version of Mark drawn into the large framed map there. Skirting the coast, the boats sail with views of a moonlit ocean as they approach a lift hill. The hill is the fort's old provisions hoist, with a winch spinning in perpetuity to complete the effect. This space sends guests traveling back in time. Herb Ryman had envisioned a lift hill into the fort in the original version of the ride at Disneyland. It just wasn't a possibility at the time. Flowing through the fort, guests can see the attack scene they are about to careen into before it happens. Pirates are scaling the walls and even swinging above guests to attack the fort. There's even a pair of cats in distress floating on some crates. Here, guests float through the classic jail scene envisioned by Mark Davis, scene this time split in half across the ride path to distract guests from what's coming. A ruptured wall in the fort caused by cannonball fire that is going to toss them out of the building via the first drop. The battle scene is actually prompted by the arrival of the boats in this version, ensuring guests get the full show unlike all of the other Pirates of the Caribbean rides. The town portion of the ride was mostly the same to those other versions of the time, but with the latest in audio animatronics technology. There's also one of the greatest innovations of all time, a set of audio animatronics who actually sword fight. While Mark Davis had drawn these characters, it was Blaine Gibson who sculpted them and brought them to life. In a famous tale, Gibson had sketched a large man dining across from him at a restaurant, knowing his face was perfect for the mayor being dunked in the well. Blaine's wife kicked him under the table all while he drew him. Special effects mastermind Yale Gracie made the burning town a reality indoors with his genius illusion. But this time, the burning town will result in the explosive finale that Walt Disney had promised for the ride on television. At the end of the town, the guests enter the arsenal. An explosion sends them down a second drop and to a few scenes of skeletal remains of the pirates, showing what became of all of them for their wicked lives. Here you'll find the legendary scenes featuring the helmsman, the pirate who met his demise on a pile of treasure, and those still reveling in a last drink. The Disneyland Railroad passes through this scene as well, something not present in any other version. Guests pull into the station underneath a talking pirate skull, another trademark of the ride worldwide. The attraction exits through a shop called Le Coffret du Capitaine, or the Captain's Chest. The sets here immerse guests in what could well be the hiding place of a pirate captain. Looking up and observing every detail, you'll see all of its treasures and even a model ship. Well, time sure flies. If you're enjoying this jump from time to time with us, please hit the like button and subscribe for more great content. If you'd like to support this show and others, you can join the WDWNT Interglobe Society at patreon.com/WDWNT. To pick up the perfect gear for your next visit to a Disney park anywhere in the world, visit the Carousel of Products at carouselofproducts.com. We'll see you real soon right here on Timekeeping.